And now I see a bunch of friendly faces popping up on screen. So I'll pass things over to Martin Luymes, Vice President, Government and Stakeholder Relations with Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Institute of Canada, HRAI. And they're now going to launch into the session, Putting Your Culture of Inclusive Recruitment into Practice. Over to you, Martin, and panelists.
Thank you, Anthony. Hello and welcome to this second panel discussion, Putting Your Culture of Inclusive Recruitment into Practice. This session will build on the previous one. I really enjoyed that one, I have to say, and hopefully we'll be able to add some additional insights to what we learned already in the previous session. I want to thank HPAC Magazine at this point and its sibling publications hosting this vital discussion. One that I believe is truly critical to the future of the mechanicals industry. As mentioned, my name is Martin Luymes. I'm Vice President of Government and Stakeholder Relations at HRAI. It's really my pleasure to be moderating this panel. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we'll be talking about non-traditional areas to be recruiting new talent for all sectors of the construction and trades-related industry, including skilled trades, supply and distribution. Engineering, and more. We'll be seeking to understand how to engage and then attract workers from diverse backgrounds. As a white male of a certain age, I can truthfully say I'm here as a bit of a proxy for the conspicuous majority of decision makers in the HVACR industry. But I hasten to add, I'm also a curious one, hopefully along with many others like me. I'm here to ask questions and to learn, and I've learned a few things already. So to begin, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Kim Rutherford, who's Director of Vendor Relations with Emco Corporation, a national distributor in the plumbing and heating sector. Kim joined Emco in 2002 and has progressed through a variety of roles, most recently being promoted in 2017 to the position of Director of National Vendor Relations. Over time, she's expanded her reach to include leadership of the product and pricing department. In 2018, Kim started National Idea Steering Team for Emco, which focused on building a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility. As a hearing impaired woman in the plumbing and heating industry, Kim is passionate about influencing change, rooted in idea at both Emco and in the industry at large. Last year, Kim was named chair of the newly created DE&I committee at the Canadian Institute of Plumbing and Heating, a committee that aims to influence change and awareness in the plumbing and heating industry. Next, we have Viktoriya Syromyatova, Director of Procurement in North America with Boralex, a Quebec-based leader in the renewable energy sector. Viktoriya has degrees in mechanical engineering and finance, as well as an MBA. She's been involved with the energy industry for more than 17 years, including 13 years in renewables. Prior to coming to Canada in 2022, she managed the renewables business of the largest privately owned Ukrainian company, DTEC, and held the position of country director for Total Iran, a French independent power producer. After relocating to Canada, Viktoriya joined Boralex, where she currently leads the procurement of equipment and services for utility-scale solar, wind, hydro, and energy storage projects for Canada and the United States. We also have Craig Swanberg, who's been with PCL Construction for 16 years. He started working for the company as a laborer and completed his carpenter apprenticeship in 2011. Later, he took on different roles, supporting recruiting and trade development for PCL's craft workforce. Currently, Craig's the workforce manager for PCL Builders in Calgary, in the Calgary District Office, responsible for all craft worker operations in Southern Alberta. Craig passionately supports DE&I initiatives in the construction industry. He believes in empowering those who work in the field and in helping them grow. And finally, we have Bill Ferreira, Executive Director with BuildForce Canada. Bill has played a leading role in Canada's construction industry for nearly a decade, most recently in his current role at BuildForce Canada. Prior to BuildForce, he served as Vice President for Government Relations and Public Affairs at the Canadian Construction Association, and as a Senior Policy Advisor in a wide range of portfolios in the federal government. Following his stint in government, Bill joined a boutique government relations firm in Ottawa, focusing his expertise on the energy, transportation, and telecommunications sectors. Welcome to our committee. Thanks for joining us. To set the table for this discussion, I want to direct my first question to Bill. BuildForce Canada reports regularly on labor market information in Canada's construction industry. Can you comment on how large the labor gaps are that we're facing and where BuildForce sees the greatest opportunities for expanding the workforce?
Sure, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. We've been looking at the next 10 years. We just published our latest report, and what we've been seeing is employment demands growing dramatically. The volume of work that the construction industry is looking at over the next 10 years continues to escalate. Before we even get started, we estimate that we're going to need about 88,000 additional workers over the next 10 years just to keep pace with those demands. When we factor in the retirement of 263,000 individuals during that period, the industry is going to need to hire about 350,000 individuals just to basically replace those individuals retiring and keep up with the volume of construction that we see out there. Now, at the same time, we estimate that we will, and this number has been increasing, increase the workforce by about 266,000 individuals. But unless we can increase recruitment dramatically, we're still going to be short about 85,000 individuals by 2033. And that's just based on our baseline assessment. As was just mentioned earlier, there's a lot of activity out there that we haven't planned for at this point because we don't know what it's going to look like. Housing is a big one. And certainly we are looking at just trying to meet the CMHC housing supply goals that were released. We would estimate that the residential workforce needs to increase by about 83% over 2023 levels. And the non-residential sector will need to increase by about 19%. So we're looking at a significant amount of work. And then, of course, the electrification of the economy is another great factor that has to be included in all this. And when we look at fuel switching alone, we estimate that that will need to increase the workforce by about another 16,000. When we factor in deep energy retrofits, probably a total of about 56,000. Then we start looking at new home construction to meet new code, around just under 100,000 individuals. So those would be demands over and above our baseline scenarios. Now, in terms of where we can find these individuals, obviously this has been mentioned already. Women are certainly a group that we should be looking to. They only make up currently about 14% of the construction workforce. But when we look at the share that women make up of the actual trades workforce, it's only 5%. So in terms of low-hanging fruit, that would be it. We need to, and we'll obviously get into this throughout this discussion as to what kinds of conditions and change we're going to have to see on work sites to try and create those conditions that would make construction more welcoming to women. But I don't want to take up too much time. I've probably already taken up far more than we needed to. So let's move on to the other panelists.
Thank you, Bill. It's clear the challenge for DE&I is the need for DE&I policies is not only driven by it's the right thing to do, it's also going to be driven by labor shortages, which are just, every business is going to benefit from thinking about these types of policies. So it's one thing to tell those employers today on this call that they should be looking at newcomers to Canada, but how does that process work? Viktoriya, as a recent newcomer to Canada, can you share your experience in finding employment here and describe the processes that you went through?
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. Hello, Martin. Thank you for having me today. My pathway maybe not 100% represent like typical pathway of newcomer, of new immigrants. I have been working in the energy business and in renewables for many years, and it's pretty global business. So it's companies work worldwide. People know each other from different countries. So when I landed in Canada, I had already several contacts in my LinkedIn. Yeah, and people also understood my achievements in my home country, can check it. So yeah, I just reached out to some people. Yeah, and actually even not asked about a work, like permanent work, but asked, can I be helpful? Yes, can I do something? Where can I bring value? Yes, for you. Yeah, and also I continue to grow my network, which is actually one of the best advice for newcomer, to reach out to new people, ask to introduce you to each other. And that's why I met Anthony, I met Michelle, who will lead the next panel. So, and yeah, some week, a couple of folks called and say, yeah, actually we have something for you. Yeah, so let's start and let's do business together. And yeah, I decided that about Boralex because of the values of the company, speaking of diversity, inclusivity, entrepreneurship, expertise is very much aligned with mine. So this was like my path, but I definitely know about like typical pathway for an immigrant, and you, because from my friends, my acquaintances, and usually it's like a lot of preparing a lot of resumes and CVs and cover letters. I've heard that some people did it like 100 CVs before founded the real job. Yeah, so can you, speaking of soft skills of newcomers, can you, what a perseverance, yeah, so 100 CVs to prepare and to send or to bring to employers. And the main issue, I would say, that all newcomers face, or what is somehow devastating, it's lack of actually feedback. Yes, so no feedback at all. So just silence. And I understand that any candidate sure expect to have feedback from potential employer where these candidates' strengths or weaknesses, but for newcomers, for new immigrants who just like adjusting themselves to Canadian standards, culture, etc. So this lack of feedback could be very damaging. Yeah, I feel that some of the people very brilliant people, yes, and especially if people maybe not really good in English sometimes, they can like lower their bar and start looking for the job that's much below their level of expertise, which is not good for them as well. But it's also, to be honest, not good for Canadian companies. And I feel that Canadian economy may lose a lot of great talents because of that.
Thank you, Viktoriya. And Kim, while many reports talk about the importance of recruiting women, First Nations populations, and newcomers to Canada, can you share your experience as a hearing impaired woman in the construction and mechanicals industry, reflecting a sector of the population that's often excluded from the recruiting conversation? Can you speak to that?
Thank you for having me here today. I'd like to introduce my pronouns, which is she, her, and in French, elle. I think that's really important that we expand the conversation and make it accessible for everyone to participate in the interview and recruiting process. When I reflect back on my time being introduced to the industry, what was really great about that experience is I not only had my soon-to-be manager, who was a man, interviewing me, but I also had two women interview me. And what a great way to have representation within the organization, particularly in an industry that is so densely populated by males and is very different than the overall Canadian census information in terms of diversity. The downside to the interview process is it was all about how I would fit in, and there wasn't a conversation about how the organization would be a fit for me. So things that I have learned through my career and changes that I've made in my recruiting process is I like to look when partnering with recruiting organizations, what is their commitment to diversity and inclusion? What are they doing to be an accessible and equitable organization and casting a wide enough net that we're getting the best possible candidates, not just from our industry, but broadly throughout the community, so that we represent the community we serve. The other thing I like to do is to attract people that fall on the neurodiversity spectrum. And this is actually a best practice I learned from somebody in the Alberta medical field, is sending questions to candidates in advance, because neurodiverse candidates really respond at the highest level when they're able to prepare. And when we think about the type of candidate we want to attract, we want people to be well prepared to make the best possible decisions, as opposed to having to respond on the fly to questions where they didn't know what to expect. So I try to include that in my recruiting process. What other things I like to do is ask the candidate, what can we do to make this the best experience for you? So what would they like the conversation to look like? What accommodation do they need for it to be an equitable experience for them? Making sure that they have access to washrooms that meet their needs, either as male, female, or transgender. Are the washrooms clean? Are they accessible to people who are not able-bodied? Those are some areas where we really need to think about not just what we post as our core values on a website, but how we put them into practice. The other thing I like to ask is, what is a dream organization for you? So not about just how they will be successful with us, but how will we be successful with them? And those are questions that when I talk to candidates, they say, you know, we don't often get those questions. We don't get asked what you can do for us. And I encourage everybody to think differently about what you're putting out there to a candidate in terms of your organization and your values, and thinking about how you can attract the best and the brightest. And by attracting the best and the brightest, it really is incumbent upon us to elevate our game in terms of our performance with recruiting and retaining. Because when I joined the industry, and even now, I still represent a minority in terms of a disabled woman in a male-dominated industry. And what has helped me in my career is having a sponsor. So somebody who has political leverage within the organization and industry, who will advocate for my success in meetings where I'm not there, and say, you know, Kim needs to be involved in this. Kim has an opportunity to add to the project, or we should get Kim involved here. Those are things that I highly recommend, as well as mentorship programs, so that when you're inviting people into your organization, it's welcoming and you have a process in place by which to support their development and encourage them to be their authentic selves and to feel respected and heard. So those are some recruiting best practices that I've learned throughout my career.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Kim. That was great. Craig, as workforce manager for PCL Builders, can you provide some insights into how PCL is recruiting today and how DEI fits into your outreach?
Yeah, thank you so much, Martin, and thanks to everyone for having me. Really happy to be part of the call this afternoon and part of the conversation. So we've started to shift the way that we approach recruiting of skilled trades to be a lot more purposeful as it relates to attracting people from a variety of communities. Typically, you know, we see the same thing for us. We'll go online and we'll post on whether it's PCL.com or on a job board or Indeed, and we'll put in the language something along the lines of, we're an equal opportunity employer. We allow people from all different diverse backgrounds to apply, but that doesn't actually attract people to come and scour through the job posting to see that this is a job posting that's available to you. This is something that's actually available. I don't think that there's a lot of people that are scrolling through pages and pages of job ads just waiting to see we're an inclusive employer. So it's about getting in front of the people and messaging to them, hey, this is an industry that's for you. This is a place that you belong and you can be your authentic self. And that could be a lot of different things, like attending job fairs that have a focus on recruiting women. So we've started to see a lot more partnerships with organizations such as Women Building Futures here in Alberta, where we'll go to their events. We'll speak to the candidates in their program will participate in the shop. We'll go to the shops for when they're doing their in-class learning. We'll go to their job fairs, and we message that and say, we're a diverse employer, but here's us coming to you and saying you should apply for this, and here's why, and giving that information firsthand, as opposed to doing it passively through job postings and online and those types of situations. We also have seen quite an uptake within Southern Alberta over recent months in our renewable energy sectors, and PCL has been a big part of developing new solar projects within Southern Alberta. And a lot of these jobs are located in remote areas of the province where you might be half an hour, 45 minutes away from a major center, or sparsely populated towns where there isn't as many traditional people to come to work. And we've seen a lot of really great opportunities to partner with some of our First Nations groups throughout Southern Alberta who have local population to these areas and might not have had traditional job opportunities to participate in a meaningful way in construction. And we've gone out and said, hey, we're working here. We want to have your people as part of our organization. We want to have you learn appropriate skills, and this is an industry that you could be a part of, and we're willing to host job fairs and hire for those. So making it a lot more purposeful to get in front of people to identify those opportunities, and just ensuring that people know what actually exists to them, and that there's opportunities in construction no matter what your background might be.
All right, thanks, Craig. Back to you, Bill. Can you speak to how the diversity of the construction workforce has been changing over the last decade, and where have you seen the most success in terms of broadening the variety of personnel within the sector?
The industry has certainly been focused on diversification, or diversifying the construction workforce away from, I guess, what we would call the historical norm. We've been seeing some progress. Historically, women have been around 10% of the overall workforce, and those numbers have been rising, not dramatically, but rising. Women now make up about just under 14% of the overall construction workforce, of which about 76% work in administration and business development, back office positions. But only about 5% are actually working in the trades directly. And that number hasn't really changed very much over the past decade. It fluctuates between provinces, but at the national level, it hasn't really fluctuated much. We also haven't seen a significant rise in Indigenous people joining the industry. They represent about 5%, it's slightly higher in the trades, about 6%. The interesting thing about Indigenous people is that about 80% of them actually work in the trades. That number has been increasing slowly, and there's certainly greater scope there for the industry to do more in terms of promoting career opportunities to Indigenous young people that might be looking for a career that would afford them the ability to expand not only their career potential, but also remain, should they wish, on reserve rather than having to move to an urban center. And there are tremendous opportunities there. Where we haven't been seeing significant progress has really been in newcomers. We've actually been seeing that number slightly declining when we look at the overall number of newcomers involved in the trades. But in general, newcomers are not keeping pace with the share newcomers now make up of the overall broader labor force of the country. And that's an area that in part needs to be corrected through policy changes, a lot of those driven by the way our immigration system currently works and its selection policy. One thing that has been really significant over the last 18 months has really been the support the federal government gave to industry through the Canadian Apprenticeship Service. And as a result, we have certainly been seeing a significant rise in the number of female apprentices registering into a program. And the number of women joining the industry in the 15 to 24-year-old age bracket is up by about 37% from 2022 to 2023. And even in the core working age group, we've seen an increase of about 10% in terms of women joining the industry. So we are seeing some successes on that front. We don't know the final results yet, but it's certainly been, I think, a very important program and probably one of the most effective uses of government funding to achieve a specific objective that I've seen in my now more than 19 years in the construction industry.
Thank you, Bill. Viktoriya, from your perspective, what type of outreach from employers makes them attractive to immigrants? What types of accommodations make for a welcoming work environment?
No, first and foremost, I believe that newcomers should be treated fairly. Yes, the same as any other employers. Yeah, we talk about that on the previous panels and now. Yeah, so this is very important. Yes, based on strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, and also important to understand that even though some of newcomers went through difficult circumstances in their motherland, yes, it's not what defined us as a professional and human being. Yes, so first of all, we are professionals and human beings. So I would see that it's important to understand what achievements, credentials a newcomer have, and as such, what maybe some specific certification or something that newcomers still lack in the Canadian landscape, and some help with that may be important. Yes, on the beginning, because yeah, after all, yeah, so the person could achieve much more, but just without some specific documents, these doors is still closed for them. As newcomers usually still settling in the Canadian life, yeah, we know all this somehow really tough bureaucracy, school kids for school, new tax system, renting, all this stuff. So some kind of help and assistance with that would very much appreciated. Just advice. Yeah, we are not talking about budget, big budget for helping exactly with that, but some resources that could help newcomers with that. Yeah, would be great. If newcomers not good in English or French, depending on the province, yeah, some courses or maybe just speaking clubs, it's something that could help as well. Yeah, and what also sometimes helpful to have someone who can help a newcomer to immerse in the new corporate culture, yeah, new business culture, new corporate culture, yeah, to give some advice, as I've heard someone mentioned mentor, sponsor, and yeah, it could be different role. We also in Boralex have such a role that someone except your direct manager with whom you just can discuss some potential issue, and even not issue, just check whether you go in the right direction. It's also something that could be helpful. So all in all, I believe respect and support as all of us. Yeah, I appreciate that, and for sure, newcomers and immigrants, yeah, it will something that help them to become the valuable and effective parts of your team.
Thank you. Kim, I'd ask you a version of the same question. How can companies best approach people with disabilities? And what type of approach makes for a welcoming work environment? You talked a little bit already about the interview process, but what more can a company do to make people with different levels of ability feel welcome in their organization?
Thank you. It starts with education, because it's a burden to expect that every candidate and teammate is going to feel safe advocating for 100% of the accommodations they need. So there's a benefit to organizations that are willing to invest in education. And some great places to start, I would say, because diversity of ability is a spectrum and disability is not limited to what we can see. We also need to consider things like 2S, LGBTQ, IA+, mental health is getting a lot of attention within organization, and access to accommodation. So when we look at all of these things, education is a great place to start. I encourage everyone to Google the video "Inclusion Starts with I." It's a wonderful video talking about the spectrum of diversity, because at the end of the day, we're all different and we all bring a different journey and lived experiences to our roles in the organization, which is one of the great things about diversity is you get different opinions when it's a safe environment and people feel comfortable sharing their opinions. The other free resource I would suggest everyone look up is in Government of Canada, Google 50 by 30. So the goal of getting 50% women by 2030. And there's free tools available to all organizations about what you can do to start your company on that path and take it to the next level. I would also encourage everyone to connect with Luann Whitecrow from CCAB about what we can do to make Indigenous teammates feel welcome in our organization, so that, again, we're the right fit for them, as well as CCDI, the Canadian Center for Diversity and Inclusion. It's a wonderful nonprofit that offers a ton of education and webinars and certificate programs geared towards education. If we want to be welcoming, then we need to educate ourselves so that we're the best possible fit for every diverse candidate. And the more we invest in education, the more we can influence change within our industry. And when we start doing that, then referencing Bill's comments and statistics about what we need to do to bring more people into the workforce, people want to work where they feel welcome. People want to work where they feel safe, and education is a huge part of that. So I would encourage everyone to invest in your own personal and professional journey as it pertains to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And when we talk about treating people fairly, it doesn't mean treating everyone the same. It means treating everybody equitable so they have the same opportunities to be successful.
Thanks, Kim. Could you talk a little bit about, I know what you've done with Emco, it's been pretty, you shared a lot there. How much of that is finding its way into the CIP committee that you are heading now? Is that, how far along are they in the path to providing resources to the industry? Can you comment a little bit about the work of that committee and its effects for industry benefit?
Absolutely. So our organization, our committee formed late last year, and one of the first steps we took was doing a survey to all members of the industry about diversity and equity, accessibility, and inclusion. And we asked for members to share their thoughts, not only about how they feel about inclusion in our industry, but also what are their organizations doing? Where do they need support? What can we do at CIPH to support their development? And while I was thrilled by the safety and honesty in the responses, it's very clear that we have a long way to go in terms of creating an industry where minorities, where women feel comfortable and want to stay in our industry. And the first place we're going to start is with training. And the Humphrey Group, for those of you who don't know, the Humphrey Group is a wonderful organization. They're based in Alberta, and their certificate program called Inclusive Leadership is a great place for every person to start. At the board level of CIPH, all board members have taken the Humphrey Group course, and I believe Robinson Supply, they also offer that to every new teammate that joins Robinson Supply, so that's part of their onboarding process. We're also looking at the CCDI organization to offer programs that help with the education of not only what can we do as individuals to educate ourselves, but what processes and tools can we put in place within each member's organization that's accessible from the large organization to the smaller organizations to make tangible differences within their organization, but also influencing all of the customers and vendors and trade organizations that we deal with. So we're just starting our journey, and I would say that where we really need to lean in is making this part of our daily conversation, and CIPH and the board and those on the committee, making it starting with definitions in terms of what do we mean when we talk about idea and what does it mean to each individual person, because it's going to mean something different to me compared to someone else. And we need to find a way to embrace all definitions so that we are changing, and it's going to be an evolution, not a revolution. So there's no one thing that we can do, but the starting point to change is education.
Craig, could you share how PCL is making job sites, construction sites, more accommodating to a more diverse collection of workers in your employ?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I mean, job sites come in a lot of different shapes and sizes and dollar values and things like that. So sometimes they're unique in our ability to accommodate everything, but there's a lot of ways that we can do it as a whole as an organization. So little things like updating our signage or our paperwork to have gender neutral terminology, using the terms journey persons or workforce instead of manpower or these types of things. You know, we've taken strides into making sure that our onboarding or our orientation information comes in a variety of languages for those that might not be English first language. So they have the safety information available to them when they get to site, and they don't feel that they have to sit and listen to somebody speak in English and kind of fake through it. There's an opportunity for them to participate in that. We touched a little bit about this earlier. Both Kim and Brandy touched about just accommodations for women or transgender people. So having either gender neutral washrooms or women specific washrooms, just so that you have for those that are okay with using a gender neutral washroom, they can feel free to do that. But then also making sure that we have a safe place that women on site can feel safe to use a washroom that's specific for their needs, and they can know that they have a place that's just for them. But also in the notion of PPE, and these are things that have evolved over time for us as well. Ordering the large or extra large gloves or vests, things like that, without consideration for people that might not be of a smaller stature, or women that might have different body shapes or body types. So we've tried to evolve that over time as well to make sure that, and it's not just PPE, but if we're giving out, hey, we bought t-shirts for everybody on the crew, but we only have large, extra large, and 2XL shirts, but there's no mediums or smalls for people that are not an extra large shirt. We've made strides to purposely make sure that we order more to include a wider variety of people as well, right? Just so that people aren't feeling left out, or they're not missing out on an opportunity to participate in what it is that we're doing. Another big part of it is just general feedback from different people of different cultural backgrounds or different areas. We had a bit of a learning experience here recently with Ramadan in 2024, and we were doing a series of traditionally what we would call lunch and learns, or lunch meetings over the lunch hour, where we would call it a lunch and learn, without realizing that we were doing it during the period of Ramadan for 2024, where people are typically fasting during the daylight hours. So taking that feedback that people give us too, and saying, hey, not everybody's eating during this time period because they have different religious commitments and different religious backgrounds, and trying to be sensitive to that and just take that feedback and evolve overall, because we don't want people to feel that they are not included or welcome to come to our meeting that happens over the lunch hour, but just changing that language and maybe saying we're having a meeting at this time, or changing the time of that meeting so that it's not impeding, or it's not related to food or something that might be insensitive to someone else.
Thanks, Craig. That's good advice. In the time we have left, we only have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask a slightly different question. I'm going to ask each of you to respond in turn with a short, kind of succinct answer. And part of it is based, I guess the question has two parts. First, are you generally optimistic about the direction that the construction, that the mechanicals industry is moving in, and what's your basis for that optimism or pessimism? And secondly, for the benefit of attendees or listeners in this webinar, what's one thing, if you could focus only on one thing, that you would recommend they take away as a learning to implement in their own businesses? Starting with you, Bill.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm very optimistic. As I said, certainly the demand for construction services seems to be growing much faster than our capacity to add people to the workforce. So it's a great time to join the construction industry. It's kind of, as Dickens said, it's the best of times and the worst of times. The worst of times for employers because their biggest challenge is just not having the labor that they need to confidently be able to bid on all that work that is out there. In terms of what can be done, I think much of it has already been talked about, and certainly I think Brandy made reference to this. We need a sea change in thinking, particularly at senior management levels. When it comes to women, as I said, that's probably the one group where we can make the most progress quickly. We need running water in their washrooms. We need separate washrooms for women. We need PPE that fits. We need PPE that isn't going to cost them twice as much as male PPE. We also need to make sure that we have an environment on work sites that is respectful and inclusive. And that is something that the industry is certainly working towards, but more needs to be done and quicker because we spend a lot of time trying to recruit individuals into our industry, but we don't give enough time to retention. And if they have a bad experience, they leave, they tell their friends tell their friends. And that is something we can't afford to do. And we talk a lot about inclusion when it comes to women, but young people in general want an inclusive workplace environment, one that is free of harassment, one that is free of bullying. Some of that is legal, some of that is workplace culture. And similar to what we saw with safety, it takes senior management to really take this seriously and start making sure that it's implemented on work sites. Otherwise, we're not going to see a change.
Thanks, Bill. Viktoriya, optimistic, pessimistic? What's one thing people can take away?
Yeah, I'm also very optimistic about the future of construction industry, including big infrastructure project. Yeah, it's labor shortage is definitely a challenge, but all people who I know in our industry never is afraid of challenges. So I am very optimistic. Yeah, so about this that we will overcome this as well. And one, I believe, again, my answer, I'm optimistic about where we are as well, because we acknowledge that it's a lot that should be done for more inclusivity, for attract more talents in this industry, and acknowledgement and discussion, fair discussion, it's already like key for success, I believe. So yeah, we are good.
Thank you. Kim, how are you feeling?
I feel optimistic that we're headed in the right direction, but not nearly fast enough. The challenges that I faced in 2002, women and minorities still face in 2024. That's not nearly fast enough. So we need men, because the majority of our industry is men, we need men to be active champions for change. We need them to stand tall. We need them to challenge problematic behavior and be part of the solution. And one request I would make of everyone is educate yourself about unconscious bias and challenge your own. Because when you challenge your own unconscious bias, it leads to education and change for yourself, and you become a stronger champion for this industry's evolution.
Thank you. And Craig?
I agree wholeheartedly with Kim's statement about trying to move things along faster and having the men in the industry stand up and be advocates for those around them. I think it's absolutely prudent for us to be able to survive and to attract the different talent, and agree that these people need need people advocating for them and helping that process along. I'd also just like to add, as far as something that we can change or that the industry can change, visibility and just normalizing diversity and inclusion on your job sites or in your workplaces. And when I say that, I don't mean that we're all going to be the same. I don't mean that we're all now just going to all of a sudden fall under the same banner or identify in the same way. But the more, and this again comes back to what Brandy said about being 2 females out of 300 men on site, the more that we see more women or more minorities or different types of people on our job sites, the more comfortable other people are going to be coming to that job site and working in that environment. Nobody, or I shouldn't say nobody, but lots of people don't want to be the first person in line, the first person to trailblaze. I'm the first woman in construction. I'm the first whatever. A lot of people want to go somewhere where they're already visibly accepted and they already have their values and they're already accepted as part of the workforce. And that's super, super important for attracting and retaining more people as it relates to the industry, to make sure that we're recognizing that and normalizing it's okay to be different and we're all different.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig. And I'm going to just add my one takeaway observation, and that is, you know, I heard in the first panel, we need to be more intentional in our behavior. And the way Rubina put it was, we need to demonstrate inclusive behaviors, lean into being curious, open, and empowering. I wrote that down. It was a very powerful statement. Luann added another phrase that I love, which is, instead of thinking our way into good acting, we need to act our way into good thinking. Mm-hmm. And what I'd like to suggest is that this panel that we just listened to provided some really excellent advice about what's working in their work environments. So being intentional is the first part, then educating and being open to new ideas and implementing them. And to pick up on what Kim said, do it today. Don't wait till we've perfected all of the science of this. We need to act, and we need to act quickly. So thank you to our committee. Thanks to Kim, Viktoriya, Craig, and Bill. And it's been a very informative session. I appreciate your willingness to share your thoughts and your wisdom on this subject. I'm going to pass it now back to Anthony. Thanks to all.
Thank you.